The Dream Cloud flash sale is here, today through Monday only. If you want better sleep, you need the Dream Cloud Luxury Hybrid Mattress. Order today and get 25% off any mattress, plus $499 in premium accessories. Visit dreamcloudsleep.com. Hurry, this offer ends Monday.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Direct-to-Video Connoisseurs. Matt here, and I am joined by a very special guest. I've got Jon Cross from the After Movie Diner. Also, Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures was the album you've got out now. My heart, Where Our Heart Could Be a Shambles is the album. And
yes.
Yes. But welcome back on the show, Jon.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt. I feel like I was just here. Because March became April super quickly.
It did. You know what I was thinking, too, because when you were on the last time, we were talking about all kinds of different things, but one of the things that came up was hockey, and it's like, this would have been like we would be talking about the playoffs right now.
I know, and it sucks. No hockey playoffs, man. Yeah, I'm missing the Leafs.
I know, and the thing is, I think at that time, that was even like a consideration for the next podcast when you were going to come on again, was maybe we'll talk about like a hockey movie with the playoffs coming. And it's amazing how quickly it has changed in such a short period of time.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Just as the hockey playoffs were kicking off, and just as like the baseball season was about to start, which are my two sports.
Me too.
And so, it kind of kicked us in the teeth, both of those things. However, my friend Nick, who's been on my show a couple of times talking about Don Dola films, he and I and Kim and his girlfriend Laurel, we have been watching, or we watched, what's The Rookie with Dennis Quaid on the Disney Channel. And then next week we're watching Mighty Ducks. So we're doing hockey and baseball movies. We're leaving about 2 or 3 weeks in between, but we're doing hockey and baseball movies. We're going to do The Natural probably with Redford or one of those. Maybe what's the I'm going to forget now. What's the no crying in baseball one? The female baseball team one?
Oh, that's League of Their Own.
League of Their Own. We might do that. A couple of others, and then obviously on the hockey side, you've got like Miracle. You've got Slapshot. You've got is it Mystery Alaska? Is that one of the ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we might if this stretches out long into the summer, we might get through a few hockey and baseball movies that way.
Yeah, because that's like one of my things I've kind of started doing since I moved down here to Philadelphia, because there's so many baseball parks around here, both professional and minor league, and so like I had this thing where I try to add a major league park and then however many minor league parks every summer. So this year was Yankee Stadium was going to be the one I was going to add for the major league park. And then I was considering going to see the Staten Island Yankees because it's supposed to be a really cool deal. Have you done that before?
It is a cool day. I've done it once, and it was a Saturday night. I don't even think it was a special Saturday night, but if it was, and this doesn't happen when you go, forgive me. But when I went on the Saturday night that I went, I've only been once, as I said, they lost horribly. They lost like 14-1 or something. But it didn't matter because as the game finished, they set off fireworks with like the Statue of Liberty in Manhattan in the background. So you're literally like sitting in, because the stadium is right on the water. The Staten Island Yankee Stadium is right on the water. And we had a full view of the field and then the scoreboard. And then behind the scoreboard, they had the fireworks went off, lighting up the Statue of Liberty and the whole of Manhattan. And I'm like, I mean, it doesn't matter that they lost 14-1 because this is like the best show in town and I've got the best seats in the house. That was fantastic. I don't know if they do that every Saturday night, but maybe look it up, and if they do, then go that night. But you got to promise me, dude, if you come in to watch baseball in my city, I gotta go to one of them with you. I've got to go to Staten Island and or the both. But I got to come to a baseball game with you if you're coming to my city. You're not allowed to come to my city and not do that, dude.
Yes, I know. I should have mentioned, but I didn't even think about the Mets one. I went to see the Mets last year. That was like the one that I added for a New York one. And I was like, and it was kind of one of those things where I was like, because as the crow flies, Queens is closer to Philadelphia than the Bronx is. Right. But what I discovered when I got it, because I've only been to New York a few times, so I haven't really done New York that much. What I discovered is that when you get into, the Penn Station area, it's a lot easier just to hop on the subway and go up to the Bronx and Yankee Stadium than it is to get all the way over to Queens. It's a much longer trip. And that was also maybe it was September I went, because the U.S. Open was happening at that time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in like the same area, but so I discovered, I was like, it actually would have been easier for me to go see the Yankees. Of course, being from the Boston area, it's one of those things where I'm like, I gotta, I'm going to see the Yankees. I gotta make sure it's not a Red Sox game, because I don't want to be like kind of like a anti-partisan or something like that. And so it was one of those things where I was like, okay, all right. So I put the Yankees on the map this year. Another one that I put on the map was in Providence, Rhode Island, or just outside it, in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Their team, the Pawtucket Red Sox, they're moving to Worcester. So it would be like my last chance to see a professional baseball game in the state of Rhode Island.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
When's
so I was
that happening?
I was gonna. They're moving after this year, so I was gonna try to get up there this year and see a game. But who knows when that's going to happen now? Who knows when they'll play? And the same way with Staten Island, because Staten Island, the Major League Baseball is contracting a lot of the. I think they're getting rid of 40 minor league baseball teams, and Staten Island's on the block to go.
Oh no, really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, so because I didn't have Staten Island on the map this year as one to go to, and then when I heard that they were on the block, I was like, well, okay, I've got to fit that one in. I got to make that one happen. So
well, look, if it happens, man, then we gotta do that. We gotta hang out. We gotta get some dogs and watch the game. That sounds awesome. And it's funny. My friend Jay Mayo actually lives near Worcester, Mass, and my wife Kim was actually born in Worcester, Mass, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
But Kim and I go to Rhode Island every year. In fact, we were due to go in May. We probably won't end up going now. But we go to Mesquamicut, which is near Westerly. Down
Westerly, I love that area. The beach there is nice.
Yeah, no, that's where we go. We're actually really sad because a really cool bar there, the Lighthouse, actually closed down, which was sort of the place we used to go to all the time. It was the one local joint. All the others are like Yahoo joints. This was like a nice local joint, and it's the only place that's kind of not open right now. But I didn't even know that Pawtucket had that baseball team. But man, that would be cool to go to Rhode Island and see a game. I know Mass and Rhode Island and even New Hampshire pretty well. I've traveled the states pretty extensively, and certainly while I've been in the Northeast, I've done New England quite a bit. So I got a lot of great memories all around that area. Even in Boston and Massachusetts, Matt. Even in the home of the Red Sox and the Bruins. Right. Curse them.
Yes. Well, yeah, it's funny because I grew up. So when you're going 95 into Maine, the first town you hit, Kittery, that's the town that I grew up in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so right across the border was that. So like growing up for us, like the Red Sox was like a big thing. Like if you to make the trip to go see a Red Sox game, usually it was like they had a team in Old Orchard Beach, called the Maine Guides that we would go see. They were a AAA team.
Oh, nice. Maine Guides.
They folded.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that was like in the 80s, and I remember, my parents would, because I was like, like I don't know, like 20 minutes away from where we lived, so it was like, an easy trip, and so like when I moved down here to Philadelphia, we're literally a mile from where the Phillies play, and so I mean we could actually walk to games here, and it's funny that I'm here and I'm like going to like minor league games in like Wilmington, Delaware, or like Trenton, New Jersey, just because I still have that like that minor league kind of itch, just like I grew up with that kind of baseball. And so it's actually cheaper a lot of times just to go to a Phillies game because I can walk there and get the cheapest ticket and sit in there and watch the game. Whereas, the train or whatever it takes to get to New York or New Jersey or wherever. But it's just there's like that feeling about minor league baseball that just it's like I don't know. It's a thing where it's it's a little bit cheaper, it's a little bit smaller. You're kind of more enclosed. I mean, the game itself is not as much fun. It's not as exciting. But there's, like you said, you see the fireworks. You get to these unique locations like there in Staten Island. It just kind of makes for an interesting game.
Yeah, no, I was kind of pissed because Kim and I moved down from Williamsburg to Prospect Heights in Brooklyn. And we moved relatively near to the Barclays Center.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just thinking, oh, this is awesome. I'll go because the Long Island team and my brain is blanking again. I don't know what's going to happen tonight with my brain blanking on this podcast all the time.
That's right. The Islanders.
The Islanders, right.
Yeah.
Of course, the Islanders. Sorry. They were playing in Barclays for the longest time because the Coliseum, they weren't using the Coliseum out on Long Island. They were using the Barclays, and I thought, oh, great, I'll go see hockey. Like, even if it's the Islanders, like, I'll figure it out. I know I'm a Leafs fan, but like Kim and I had been to see a Leafs Islanders game, I want to say 2 years ago now, at the Barclays, and I was like, even if the Leafs just roll into town like once every few months, I'll go see a game. That's in my hood. And then, of course, the moment we get here, the Islanders announce that they're going back to the Coliseum, and I'm like, damn it! Yeah. I could have walked to games. Like, I could have gone to see.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, because that Coliseum, that thing is not near any public transportation.
No,
that is like way out there. Yeah, I mean, I've heard it's like supposed to be like I've never been to see a game in Madison Square Garden. I imagine that must be an experience. But
yes,
they say
it is. Yes.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like kind of a different hockey experience, but also like one that's like kind of like a transcendent hockey experience to go see a game there.
Yeah, I got to see the Leafs play at Barclays, and I got to see the Leafs play at Madison Square for my 40th. My friend Nick, who's also the Yankee fan, got me a Leafs Rangers game at Madison Square, which was awesome. And then we also went to see because he's a Buffalo guy, he's a Sabres guy. So whenever the Sabres are in town and the Leafs aren't in the town, I'll be a Sabres fan for one night for him, because we always we'll go along and watch the Sabres either at Prudential in New Jersey or in Madison Square. And when we go, I'll side with just because never the Rangers or the Devils, but I'll side with the Sabres for one night only. But yeah, so I've seen a couple of games in Madison Square Gardens. And unfortunately, the Leafs Rangers game that he got for my 40th birthday, which was amazing, and I loved it. The Leafs did not win, sadly, that game, but they did win against the Islanders when I saw them at the Barclays Center. So that was cool.
See, I have not been to a Flyers game yet here. I've been trying to find a good one to go to here. It looks like I was trying to see if my wife would go, and she hasn't quite felt up to it. So I've been like, okay, maybe I'll just go catch one myself. And I was on the verge of picking a game when all of this happened, because it'd been more like one of those things where I was like, okay, let's find one to go together. They were usually expensive too. That was the other problem. I think one of the things with the Flyers here is just everybody loves them so much here in Philadelphia that it's like, yeah, and then the other thing too is that if there's any Canadian team that plays, I don't know what that's about. I guess there's maybe a large Canadian population here, or they just travel well. But it's like, I think the Winnipeg Jets were playing a game here one night.
Oh wow!
I think the cheapest ticket was like $56 for like a nosebleed type deal. And it's like
yeah.
And I was taking the subway that day for something else, and our subway stop is one before where the sports complex is where all the teams play, and I did see a guy and his wife getting on to go south, to where they were with a Winnipeg Jets jersey on. So go figure that there's probably, I guess they're just everywhere. Team play. So it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I get it's weird being a British guy who lives in New York who happens to be a Leafs fan. I guess that's pretty odd, but even odder, I think, to be a random Winnipeg Jets fan in Philly. Like that, even that seems
I couldn't believe it.
Just because Winnipeg seems like another land, like it's
Yeah.
not even another country, like just another. I have a cousin who lives in Winnipeg, and I kind of want to go visit just for the excuse, because I'm kind of intrigued by the Great White North. But the idea of being like a Winnipeg Jets fan and living in Philly, I mean, I suppose it happens, but
it blew my mind. And it was funny because I was like, I remember had been looking at the schedule to pick a game, and I was like, is this the Jets weekend? Is that what I mean, I was like, that looks like a Jets jersey, and that's like, and it was like the old Winnipeg Jets jersey from the 80s when they were, before they moved to Phoenix.
Maybe he's just a hipster, Matt. Maybe maybe he went into a hockey store and he was like, I can't get any of these new jerseys.
Right. Yeah. Like,
that wouldn't be ironic enough.
Right.
Let me find what is the most. He went in. He went in with a monocle and a dirt mustache and walked up to the counter and went, "Good sir, I want the most ironic jersey I can find." And the guy was like, "We have a Winnipeg Jets jersey." Yeah. 1988.
Yeah, he's like, all the kids are wearing it. Hartford Whalers, that's old. Everybody's done the whale. You need to get the Jets. Nobody knows the Jets, you know. It was like,
he probably was. He was probably some, Philly, because parts of Philly now are pretty hip. So from the first time I moved over to New York and I was doing the diner, I used to get. And I probably still could. I just haven't been in a while. But I used to get the Wizard World press passes for Philly Comic Con, because it was the closest Comic Con that they did. Wizard World did near New York, and I would get to try and get like a cheap Marriott room or something, and come down and go to the convention center there, and then go to the big what's the big eatery, the big food court place right there, Reading Market.
Oh no, Reading Terminal Market. Yes, that's right, Reading Terminal.
Yeah. And really outside of Reading Terminal and like a couple of sports bars and a few other things around that part of town, there really wasn't anything for like the longest time. And the last time that I went to Philly Comic Con, which even now is going back 5-6 years, but the last time I went, like there was suddenly like all these bijou eateries and little frou-frou cafes and things. I'm like, it looked like a cross between Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and New Orleans. I'm like, what happened to Philly?
Even worse now. Even worse. My wife grew up here and she can't stand it. Like she's losing her mind. And like you see like stickers. There's like these series of stickers now that say "Keep New York out of Philly," because what's happened is that like I think one area of Fishtown is like one that I think a lot of people moving from New York have taken that one over. But
I can't apologize enough. I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. Not your fault.
You can't blame me for the New York hipsters. They were hip before I got there.
No, it's not your fault. But it is. I think it's like it's sort of like the thing and that area that you're talking about near where the convention is, there's a Trader Joe's there now. There's a Starbucks. It's funny. I went to the McDonald's there. It was like 3 or 4 months ago. I was just kind of having a rough time. I was like, I'm just gonna get some really crap, fast food, just kind of binge on it. And there was one of those. Yeah, exactly. And what did they have? What was the convention? It was like Dungeons and Dragons. Like it's like there's a term that they have for the role playing games. It's like I guess it's like not
tabletop gamers.
Yeah, it's like something like not electronic or something like that. And apparently that McDonald's, everybody called in sick that day that worked at that McDonald's. They had 3 people working there, literally, and the line was just out the door. And of course there was like what was it, the kids call them Karens, like those moms that are like really obnoxious. Yeah. She's like complaining that they didn't prepare for this convention thing. Like Philadelphia only has one convention a year, and it's this tabletop gamers convention. That's the only thing they have. And for some reason that the manager in his infinite wisdom at that McDonald's only wanted to staff 3 people, because 3 people is enough to run a McDonald's on a normal day. But when there's the tabletop convention, that's the only convention Philadelphia ever has all year.
If you're at the convention center, go to Reading Terminal Market. Like Reading Terminal Market is like right there, and you have like food from around the world. Like it's
there, and
glorious.
They're better staffed. Not everybody's calling in sick there. Let us have
our
big Macs.
Dude, the fried dough from the what are they called? The Amish, little Amish store that's in the Reading Terminal Market. They're little like donuts that they do.
Yes. Spilers, I think it is.
So good. Yeah. And then I have had some times in Philly back in the day when I first lived out here, and I'm talking about like 5 or 6 years ago, and then a few years before that. I've been in New York now over 11 years. So when I first got here, that was one of the things I did. I used to love coming down to Philly as well. It was a great town. I really like it down there. And I've done all the touristy stuff. I've done the Liberty Bell, and I've done all the historical stuff, and I've done the warring cheesesteak stands that are just outside of town. There's like one either side.
Cheesesteak corner. Yes. Yeah.
Well, one either side of the road or whatever, and yes, I've done that and all the rest of it. I've done all the good stuff because that's what you do when you're in Philly. I've gone to all the 12 Monkey locations because they filmed a bunch in Philly for 12 Monkeys. So yeah, I love Philly, but yeah, well, last time I was there, I'm like, what is all this stuff?
Right.
Give me where's the grimy sports bar under the overpass? What is that? Like, there's a sports bar that's like under the overpass just down by the hotels, literally probably blocks from the convention center, like within walking distance from the convention center. There's like a grubby sports bar under the overpass, and it's absolutely perfect. It was where I I got drinks after the Philly Comic Con back in the day, but. Yeah, it's probably all some frou wine bar now. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. One suggestion I would make, if you get to the market again, my favorite thing to get there, there's this place called Beck's Cajun Cafe, and they make this version of a cheesesteak called the Trainwreck.
Oh,
it's
wow.
like, the meat, cheese, andouille sausage. It's got like, it is, because I mean, people, like, that's one of the biggest mistakes people make when they come to Philly is they get their cheesesteak at the market, and the cheesesteak places there are crap. Like, it just
right.
There's no, you might as well just get a cheesesteak outside of Philadelphia if you're going to get one of those. But that Trainwreck, it's like I don't know, if you're like a wannabe Hunter S. Thompson writer writing for a magazine, you'd call it like the twisted cousin of the cheesesteak or something like that. It's it's like some kind of term like that you'd use for it. But it's probably my favorite thing to get there.
Nice.
So every time you're back in, also if you're ever in 30th Street Station, they have a location there. So if you're ever taking the train through Philly and you got to stop off and getting another train, Beck's is in 30th Street.
I'm telling you, dude, when all this blows over and we can travel again, certainly interstate, I'll give you a weekend out in New York. You give me a weekend out in Philly. So that's the deal. That's happening.
We got to do it. Yeah,
we'll do baseball. We'll get burgers at Paul's to Burger Joint down in the Village, which is my favorite burger joint. Big, fat, juicy meat patties with it's the best. Handmade, homemade. It's so good. And we'll do baseball, and then we'll catch like some random B movie at one of the small theaters or something. We'll figure it out. Yeah, but we'll make that happen, dude. We'll do a cultural exchange between Philly and New York.
Yes, I think that's fantastic. Because we're so close here. Yeah, but definitely once this all bulls over. I didn't know you were. I knew you were a hockey fan. I didn't realize baseball too. So that's great because New York has just so many good baseball options between the two major league teams.
And I've never been to the Mets. I've never been out to what do they call it now? Capital One Stadium or whatever it's called. No, it's not that, is it?
It's one of those things where like I didn't
Old
just
Chase Stadium,
right?
But I don't know what it's called now.
Yeah. It's a place to just mark off a list. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like it's
totally.
like the one here in Philly is pretty much the same thing. Like a lot of these new ones that are meant to look like was it Camden Yards and
right.
Which I love Camden Yards in Baltimore. I think it's one of my favorites. And that's kind of what they're meant to look like. And so it's like, I think if it's your ballpark, like, the Phillies one now for me, just living so close to it, I have like a special place for it. I think if you're a Mets fan, it's a special place. There are some cool parts of it, but it's definitely like a mark it off the list kind of one where it's like you want to say you've done them all. Like kind of the same thing with hockey where it's like, like the Barclays Center is probably a nice place to see a hockey game, but it's like you'd mark the Coliseum off your list.
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, I'm not counting. I'm only counting it because I got to see the Leafs up close and personal because tickets at the Barclays for a Leafs Islanders game was, an off-season Leafs Islanders game. It wasn't even playoffs or anything. It was earlier on in the season, and it was like $40, and we got to sit basically 3 rows from the ice. So, it's not often you get to see like a Leafs team, especially as strong as the team we've had the last couple of years, play that close up for the kind of money that I have. So that was the draw there. Yeah. Anytime I've been either to the Prudential or Madison Square Garden, it's always been not quite nosebleeds, but fairly high up there. And I have to say, I actually probably prefer the Prudential Center to Madison Square Gardens. It's just it's like a slightly grungier vibe in when you go out to Jersey. I just kind of slightly enjoy it a bit more.
I love it.
One day I will get to what I still call the Air Canada Center, but I believe is now called the Scotiabank Arena.
Yeah.
But I have to make this stand, Matt. I don't mind who buys arenas and baseball parks and stuff like that, but it should be like it should be the whatever, like the Maple by Scotiabank. Like that I would accept that, but calling it like the Scotiabank Arena or even the Air Canada Centre, although I prefer Air Canada because at least Canada's in the title. But then it's the same with like Citi Field. Shea Stadium is now Citi Field. Like it should be Shea Stadium by Citi Field or the Mets Field by Citi or something like that. Like I don't like these corporate names in the names of sporting arenas. It takes away the sport of and the history of it all, I feel like.
Yeah, that was one thing in Boston that was nice because I grew up with the Boston Garden there, and then they closed it. And the whole point of the Boston Garden was actually it was the guy who owned Madison Square Garden was making his own. He was trying to make gardens everywhere, and so he made the Boston Garden. And then when they closed that for a period, it was called the Fleet Center. When the next company came in, and they opened up the new one, and it was like Fleet Bank was the company, and that bank was bought like 3 or 4 times, and finally it's owned by TD Bank, and they decided to call it the TD Bank Garden, to call it the Garden again. Yeah. So in Boston, nobody calls it the TD Bank Garden; they just call it the Garden.
The Garden, right? The Garden. And they're never going to change Fenway Park. I mean, Fenway Park will be Fenway Park until the last Red Sox fan dies a massive coronary. But
yes. Yeah, and I'll be honest. I'm again somebody who grew up with Fenway Park as being my home stadium. It's I don't want to say overrated is the term because I don't want to tell somebody not to go if you've never been to Fenway Park. But the seats are uncomfortable. The angles are horrible. It's way overpriced. Like the ownership, which I should not be complaining about an ownership that has delivered 4 World Series when I grew up thinking they would never win a World Series, and now they've been 4. But they kind of build it as like this amusement park now with the whole Sweet Caroline thing and all that stuff, and it's I think for they call it America's most beloved ballpark. I think there are a lot of people that would say their ballpark was better, and I wouldn't argue with them. And so it's like it's one of those things where it's like kind of a love-hate thing that people in Boston have, where it's like, you love that it's the ballpark, but and again with the owners, like I don't know how we can really complain about these owners that have delivered 4 championships. And they finally went and delivered one for Liverpool, I guess, right? I think Liverpool, or they got the Champions League title or whatever. But
okay, I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Yeah, they own Liverpool, so it's like one of those things where both team fan bases. Boston fans think that they don't spend enough because they're spending it all on Liverpool, and Liverpool's fans think the same thing about they're spending all their money on the Red Sox. So
everybody hates them.
Right, exactly. So
the Everton fans are like, I'm just glad people aren't looking at us.
Right, exactly.
What I think is hilarious is that on Direct-to-Video Connoisseur, where we're meant to be like, B-movie film nerds, we've just spent 30 minutes talking about sports like we're a couple of red-blooded Americans.
Right. Well, but we were talking about it in kind of a geeky sense of like we've got to go see these ballparks and everything.
We were saying, we
were getting the minutia. Or I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to start an Excel spreadsheet so I can cross off the. Cross off the ballparks that I've been to, Matthew. I've got a special little spreadsheet. I've actually created it on Google Sheets because that way it's in the cloud. One of the things I was going to say at the top of the show was, don't worry, everyone. I'm wearing my hat that clearly says the word podcaster on it because God forbid people don't know what I am. Because in Ninja Strike Force, all of the ninjas, even the bad ninja, wear bands around their head that say the word ninja on them. And now I'm sure that was because the producer and director who were trying to capitalize on the Shokasugi American canon ninja film market by sort of pumping out a whole bunch of different ninja style movies. In Asia, I'm sure they were like, let's have ninja written on them just so that everyone in America is damn clear that these are all ninjas. But can you imagine if Hollywood felt the same way, and they were like, shit, what if someone in Asia sees this cowboy movie? We better write cowboy on everybody's hat. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that would be great. Or like, if they were showing like a sport that, like baseball, or a sport that, that they, like hockey or something maybe that they don't have, and it's like, they just all write hockey on their jerseys.
Yeah, they just there's no hockey team.
Right.
It just says the hockey team, and then on the that's all it is. But no, it's hilarious that all the ninjas in this, not only are none of them like, even the black ninja, the one they call the Black Ninja, is in bright spangly purple. No one is in black.
Yes. And what I love too about the script is like, it's either ninja and it's written in the script that looks like an 80s ski lodge. It's like kind of this fancy like lettering, or it's like this like Lions Club, Elks Lodge kind of like, like ninja, like kind of just like straight like, block characters. That looks like it's like their membership lodge, ninja lodge or whatever.
What they did, apparently, I was reading up on this today, because this comes fairly late in Godfrey Ho and Joseph Lai.
Like 88, right?
Yeah, it's 88, and they had been doing a run for quite some time. Right. And of what they did was they formed a company very early on. They bought up a ton of half-finished Korean films that no one had seen outside of Korea, and they had them sitting around. And when the ninja craze kicked off, Godfrey Ho spent a weekend filming a few expat, either American or British guys dressed up as ninjas in various locales around the town. And then he used that same footage and just edited it into 500 different unfinished Korean films, essentially. And but it worked, because they say that I was reading up on it, and apparently every film festival that Joseph Lai would attend, where he was kind of the sales dude. Godfrey Ho was the director, and Joseph Lai, the producer, was kind of the sales dude. He would go to all the film markets around the world, and at any given time when he would go to a festival, he could sell up to 60 movies at any given time, which is unheard of. So they were pumping these out at quite a rate.
I mean, you think about it, if you're a video store in the 80s, and that kids and probably young teens, but even adults were pulling these ninja movies, the Shokuzugis, the American Ninja series, that those things are just flying off the shelves. It's like, I'll spend $80 for this ninja movie, and it's going to make its money back in a few weeks, with people renting it. So it made sense, I'm sure, at that time to just be like, and we'll take
Lai and Ho probably made their money just from doing the deal, let alone any residuals they got from rental houses or screening rooms. But I mean, they pumped out. Godfrey Ho, doesn't he have like 100 and something credits?
Yeah,
I think. Yeah. I think as director he has 149 credits. Yeah. Most of those being in the 80s and early 90s. But in the 80s, he was making, or they were producing between the two of them, about 20 to 25 movies a year. Yeah. Even Eric Roberts doesn't manage that.
Exactly, or David Dakota. The guy who does like the wrong movies, who's like him and Vivica A. Fox. Like they wish they could do what he was doing.
Definitely. And people think what's interesting about Godfrey Ho as well is that people think it was all about the 80s ninja craze. His first movie in 1973 was called The Blazing Ninja.
Right. Yes. So
he's been doing some ninja stuff since way back when. He really lit a fire under that ninja bandwagon and got it rolling. But had, by all accounts, had a fairly prestigious career as well as a first AD on a bunch of very well-known Hong Kong and Asian action movies before he became a director in his own right. So a fascinating guy. But he basically made more or less 30 movies a year, and at least 90% of them have ninja in the title.
Right. Yeah. And, my thinking about this movie compared to, so like, I mean, you were talking about, like Rage of Honor, and like Pray for Death, some of those really big Shokuzugi ones.
Yeah.
I think of those ones like when you have that friend who like is a big like they only watch like Hollywood films, or they only watch like artsy fartsy kind of art house things, and that you want to like introduce them to B movies, and you've only got like one shot to do it. I think some of those Sho Kosugi ones, those might be on your list of like this might be the movie that I think was it Simon Miller from Explosive Action talked about how he showed Avengement to his friends, and they're like, wow, you actually gave me a good movie this time. Usually have, the things are ridiculous that you give us. And I feel like the Sho Kosugi ones, those can do that. Whereas like the Godfrey Ho ones, those are the ones where it's like your friends have a bad movie night and you want to be the one that has the best bad movie. The Godfrey Ho ones are the ones that people can riff through the whole time, have a lot of fun with. It doesn't matter if you're paying attention because that plot that's in that. I mean, in fact, you probably want to listen to as little of the plot as possible because it's hard to make fun of. In this movie, you had two guys that were helping to care for a boy that was developmentally delayed. And so probably the less you hear of that plot, the more likely you're going to make fun of it because you really can't make fun of it.
I didn't even pick up on that. There was a couple of guys that were trying to make money washing cars, and one of them was potentially the answer to the ninja problems. And the ninja problems were, as far as I could figure it, there was a black ninja of no affiliation, even though he wore giant purple spangly shoulder pads, who was going around and killing other ninjas, all of whom were in pastel shades of pink, orange, lemon, and various other colors, un-ninja-like, and without hiding either, just showing right up and just being like, I'm here and I'm a ninja. And like he had the and he had the sword of calamity or something. What was it? The sword of catastrophe. Which is hilarious. Who would make the sword of catastrophe? Right. You know what I mean? And did they start off with the dagger of unease and build up to it? Like, how did that? You know what I mean? The scabbard of mild annoyance.
Maybe the attempt was right. They were supposed to be trying to make the sword of like success or wealth or great things happening or something, and it ended up like something went wrong in the forging process perhaps, and suddenly. Oh, I didn't mean to do this.
I made the sword of catastrophe. Now every ninja in the land has to die so I can get ultimate power. There's because the main thread of the movie, in other words, the bit that Godfrey Ho shot and then edited into this, is the bit with Richard Harrison, which is his master dies at the beginning at the hand of the black ninja, and his dying breath, he says, go gather all the other ninjas to make sure that the black ninja doesn't kill them, because if he kills the 4 master ninjas with the sword of insanity, then he'll gain ultimate power or whatever, right? So that's the setup. And you go, okay, I'm in for the setup. And then it immediately cuts away from that setup because they don't have anything more filmed for that bit. And it immediately cuts over to what I presume is one of these Korean movies, which seems to be about a couple of guys who are running a car washing business, one of whom keeps getting fired from waiting jobs. And then they go to, he also has a love of classical music and is trying to woo a woman who is also into classical music, but then she disappears, but then she comes back later in the movie. So once you start to try and follow that second plot, then you really are in trouble. And then ever so often, Richard Harrison shows up very briefly and goes, look, more ninjas over there. And then there's another fight and a ninja dies. Did I cover that pretty well? Is that pretty much?
Yeah, and the one thing too is that Godfrey Ho does a good job of doing a technique that a lot of directors do when they use Eric Roberts in a movie, and that is you put Richard Harrison technically in a room that looks very similar to the one that the characters in the Korean movie are in. So it looks like Richard Harrison is talking to this actor in the Korean movie who has the secret to defeating the sword.
Yes.
And we're none the wiser. You know,
this really guy who can't keep a simple serving job, has got the secret to defeating the sword of insanity or chaos or whatever it is.
Well, he can't keep a simple serving job, but not only does he have the secret to the sword of chaos, but he's also a whiz at creating advertising, marketing campaigns, because his second girlfriend. He has one girlfriend, and suddenly he has so it makes me wonder if Godfrey Ho is combining multiple movies here, because at some point he has another girlfriend, and he's in school too. He's like in architecture school or something like that, and he was like finishing top of his class, and all the while ninjas are dying, and he's just keeping the secret to himself because he made a promise to his mother that that he can't give away the secret to beating the Sword of Catastrophe. So ninjas are just dying, and I mean, and like you said, they're like kind of like, you know, like tropical starburst colors, you know, that of like the different shades of pastels. I mean, maybe that's what Godfrey Ho was going for, was maybe like the Miami Vice pastel movement at that time, and he was trying to cash in on that. But you know, that's the thing, is that like his procrastination and not wanting to tell this secret to Richard Harrison is just causing people to die. Yeah, I mean, is it that? And apparently Richard Harris, I guess I have to confess, if I was that young guy too, I don't think I would have given away the secret either, because Richard Harrison really wasn't that convincing. Like he was like, oh, you know, more ninjas are going to die, and it's like, really, are they really going to die? I mean, you're not really selling it to me that much. Like, you know, you
look like an accountant who's here on holiday. Wearing some pajamas. You do not look like. He's like, yes, but behold my headband. It has the word ninja written on it. It's like, listen, every headband I can buy in this town has ninja written on it. I could go out right now. It becomes like a whole Big Lebowski toe thing. He's like, oh, you want a ninja headband? I can get you a ninja headband with nail polish by 3:00 this afternoon. So yeah, no one's believing Richard Harris. I have to say, so there's a few things. First of all, I kind of love the cinematic testicles that it takes to do what Ho and Lai did for so long, and get away with it, and still, if anything, be getting away with it, because these things have got bigger and bigger as the years have gone on. Sadly, because of people's appetite, I think, for so bad it's good movies, and just kind of laughing at stuff ironically. But there was a great paragraph from an article that I read today in Den of Geek from 2015, which was about Godfrey Ho and his World of Ninjas, and I thought it really summed up like how I kind of feel about these movies and other kind of B movies from the 80s. And the quote is, "It isn't really about whether these films are good or bad. They are so far outside of what constitutes regular filmmaking that value judgments feel redundant. I think deep down, especially as film grows arguably safer by the year, some of us just crave a little cinematic anarchy." And like, I love that quote, like cinematic anarchy, because I always feel, and maybe I'm giving people, Godfrey Ho and his movies a little too much credit, but I always feel like if someone had like the balls, guts, tenacity, and marketing know-how to produce 700 ninja movies in the span of 8 years, you kind of want to just sort of celebrate that. You kind of want to applaud it. I know we've been down this route before when we've talked about, but you kind of want to just sort of celebrate that insanity. And collage is an art form, montage is an art form. These things already exist within, quote unquote, the art world. And while one person looking at Godfrey's movies might think that they are sort of insane thefts and butchering of potentially okay movies, you can look at it as this sort of gonzo collage or montage of insanity that at least has some sort of cinematic guts to it and creates a little bit of anarchy. And I kind of like to look at them a bit like that. Of course I chuckle when like a guy dressed in a bright pink dildo like ninja costume shows up. Of course that's funny, but I'm never, to my mind, I'm laughing at it because it's genuinely funny. I'm not laughing at it because I'm above the movie. I'm not above this movie. I couldn't go out and do this any more than anybody listening probably could. But the fact that they exist gives me joy and life and a little bit of anarchy. I like that.
No, I agree with you there. I mean, that's like when I was on your show recently, we were talking about the my Albert Pyun list, and I put Deceit at number 2, where I would have probably put Cyborg or Pyun's his director's cut of Cyborg, because I just love the idea that he made Deceit over 3 days using equipment that he was forced to rent in order to do reshoots that Van Damme insisted on. He's like, okay, I'm going to take this equipment that that we're renting to make these reshoots that I don't want to use, and I'm going to use the equipment off hours to film a movie, to get it on the cheap or whatever. It's kind of like, and to be honest, I think he got a lot of his inspiration from people like Godfrey Ho from Sirio and Santiago. He said he cut together trailers for Santiago movies when he was getting started in the movie business. So, I think it is like you said. It's like this. Like you said, when we're laughing, I mean, there are, some of the dialogue is funny, like some of the things that, and I don't know that it's funny because, Godfrey Ho spent all this work trying to make this really great script and make the dialogue funny. It's more like just what comes, what happens when he's just kind of cobbling together a script that he thinks is going to work in conjunction with this ninja stuff. And I agree with you there. I love the idea of just like, I'm going to take these pieces of movies that nobody's using. I mean, when the camera wasn't, the movie was invented in the late 19th century, there was no concept of doing some of the stuff that we're doing with it.
Right.
And I agree with you there that I think it's the same way that, they talked about in the 80s how, or, in the late 70s into the 80s, how, some people saw graffiti on the trains in New York as being like a horrible thing, whereas other people saw it as a really great expression of art, and they were trying to figure. I think there was an understanding of like, what do you make of this? Is it vandalism? Is it a form of art? The fact that they're doing it usually in pitch black circumstances. They've got like a little tiny thing that they're trying to, what it took for them to make those, whether you think it's vandalism or not, and it's almost a sense that like. I think there are people who kind of see Godfrey Ho as being like a cinematic vandal of some sort, where he's taking these things and cutting them together. But I agree with you there. I mean, I don't know, again, how I feel about graffiti so much, but with this, I feel like it is something that I always appreciate these Godfrey Ho movies, even if I'm laughing at things that are happening in them and I'm getting a kick out of things. I always appreciate the fact that he did this, that he was able to. I mean, He dubbed over with new dialogue, all of that stuff.
Well, this was the other thing is that considering he's chopping together parts of other movies, the stuff that he leaves in is an absolute delight. There's a sequence with the two guys at the table talking about something or other, and at the end of the sequence, the kid runs up with one of those little plastic fans. What are they called? Windmills on a stick, kind of little plastic windmill on a stick. And instead of just having the voiceover be like, nice windmill, and then cut the scene, one of the guys who's talking to the kid in the Korean movie is overdubbed being like, you broke it. What did you do? You broke it. Like, instead of cutting the scene, he adds this whole level of, apparently this guy is now angry with his child because he broke something that we weren't previously aware of anyway, but he's like trying to layer drama in the weirdest way possible, because the kid's all happy and the guy's all happy, and I think even the guy shouting at him has a relatively happy face, but the voiceover is like, you broke it. What did you do? You broke it. And I'm like, that's genius. Just to kind of whip in some added drama about a plastic windmill. It was just one of those things where I'm like, you could have cut that 2 seconds sooner, got rid of the whole windmill, you broke it thing.
Right.
But he left it in, and I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like, like you said, like what he decided to do with that character. And it is funny because, I think the one thing is like, you think because he's a ninja, he's actually going to fight people, and he gets like beat up a couple times and that kind of thing. And but I think if you don't realize what he's doing with the movie, if you don't know that what he's trying to do, you may not see it until you get towards the end and you realize like, wow, these two plots aren't really coming together. That like they're
not at all. No.
Right. It takes time to figure that part out, and I think that's probably part of the genius as well with Godfrey Ho is that. Unless people know what they're getting with these movies, and I mean now they're on Tubi, they're all available on Tubi. So I think that he does it in a way that yes, some people will probably feel like they got ripped off watching it. But on the other hand, I think more and more people are appreciating what this is and getting a kick out of it for what it is. And I agree with you there that there's something different about this kind of a movie than, yes, you can go through the whole Jean-Luc Godard catalog, and I enjoy his films as well. And to some sense, it's almost like a similar vibe where, Godard would just throw things together and just, he was trying to make like unfilm in a way.
Right.
Godfrey Ho is a little different because Godfrey Ho is not trying to make unfilm, but he's trying to make something marketable, but he's almost doing it in a way that's even more gonzo than someone like a Godard. Like it's like less up his own ass, I guess is the best way to think of it.
I mean, yeah, it's. I tell you what, this is something else as well. So after he did his ninja movies, in the 90s, Godfrey Ho kind of stepped away from kind of cutting stuff together and actually sort of started making a few movies that were as best as he could do, sort of linear stories in the very much in the kind of PM entertainment vein. One of the most famous ones is Undefeatable. Right. Another one also starring Cynthia Rothrock is Honor and Glory. Both are very entertaining watches. But like, this is where I'm coming from, Matt. Like Undefeatable, the last sequence, the fight sequence in Undefeatable, has something stupid like 20 million views on Twitter because it kind of went viral, and 20 million views on YouTube because it sort of went viral and people were laughing at it and, oh my God, can you believe this movie and blah, 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 blah. But when you go to see Kill Bill or Grindhouse or Jackie Brown or any of the Tarantino or even Rodriguez ones like Planet Terror or whatever like that, people will like do backflips out of the cinema being like, oh my God, man, that was like the coolest thing I've ever seen. Oh my God. Right. And they'll get really excited and just praise Tarantino and Rodriguez to the hill. But like every time Tarantino and Rodriguez are doing something that is like they're telling us this is cool. So when like we do a crash zoom into the eyes, or we have someone like tear their jacket off, or we have someone wearing like a particular outfit or something like that, they're like, this is cool. See how cool this is. I'm going to show you how cool this is. Whereas when you watch something like Undefeatable, like they're doing stuff that is over the top and melodramatic and operatic, because that's been the bread and butter of martial arts movies forever. I mean, they come out of Chinese theater and Chinese opera. Like that's where that stuff got started. It was all very dramatic and melodramatic. And secondly, Godfrey Ho's movies like Undefeatable and Honor and Glory and stuff are trying to do things that are like quote unquote like Hollywood cool. Like he's trying to take what's in Hollywood and kind of do like his own insane like cool twist on it. But when he does it, everyone laughs. When Tarantino does it, he's like this fucking genius. And I think that's where I get pissed off. Like if, or like the other, like Kim was just talking because the Beastie Boys documentary has come up to watch on whatever, right? But like you think of like the Beastie Boys doing like that 70s cop thing, right? And they're all dressed up as 70s cops or whatever. Like people watch that and they think, oh my God, that's so like badass and cool and whatever. But when they watch the 70s Italian cop films that they're kind of taking off, they like laugh at them. Right. And both things are totally legitimate. Like Tarantino, Beastie Boys, fine, love them, of course. But like to then openly laugh or mock the things that those things are coming from, you're missing the point. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a to my way of thinking, that kind of like haphazard gonzo cool that is shown in either 70s weird Italian 70s cop films or mad Godfrey Ho 90s action films. Like I live for that stuff way more than I live for the things that are either imitating them or taking the piss out of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't think of what I'm trying to say, but I hope I've got close.
I'm with you. I mean, I think one of the things, like, Ty and Brett with their comeuppance reviews, they were talking about how they're called comeuppance reviews not because they're giving movies their comeuppance, but because the bad guy gets his comeuppance.
Yes.
But then when they talk about movies like this, they talk about it like they're almost like they're, when there's funny things that happen, they're laughing with the movie,
Yes.
And I think that's really the difference is like, yes, you can laugh at the ninja in the cutesy outfits and all that because it is funny. I mean, the ninja being written across the thing is hilarious, but
yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
like I said, it's like watching a spaghetti western, and
right,
because Italians don't know they've written cowboy across every hat. Like it's
right,
stupid.
exactly. Yeah, it's fantastic in that sense, and but you're right that there's something about these movies, especially. I mean, I just it's nice to just you get in, get out in 90 minutes, and you get to see something that somebody's doing that with this medium of cinema that is just it's. I mean, collage is probably the best way to describe it, but it is something that for me, I just really appreciate. I mean, I love the idea of it. I just love the idea of anytime I think of people making lemonade out of lemons when it comes to art in this way, it is just so fascinating to me. And I also I love it in the sense of like trying to port myself back to being 10, 11 or whatever, and maybe something like this being on TV on a Saturday afternoon or something, or a Sunday afternoon, or seeing it in the video store shelves and being like, oh, this looks really cool, and watching it and probably not really knowing why I'm only seeing ninjas like every so often, and the rest of the time is these guys going around like with their car washing jobs and stuff like that. Whereas now as an adult, it's like, no, this dude just took this movie and turned it into something, and I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, I would rather feel the way we feel about it,
yeah,
or have someone just tell me flat out they're garbage. I think that's an absolute acceptable response as well. Like for someone to just be like, this is ass, I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I will take those two responses over the person who's like, oh my god, man,
Yes.
like, did you totally see that the fucking ninja was like fucking wearing a red thing? Like, fucking, that's ridiculous, man.
Yeah.
Like, those people need to be shot out of a cannon. But no, I mean, I will laugh at stuff, but I'll never consider myself above the movie. And it was like that. I was watching a documentary recently. I just reviewed it for the After Movie Diner. It's this whole new 3-part, 5.5-hour documentary about so-called cult films.
Mm-hmm.
And I say so-called because one of them is like The Big Lebowski, and I'm like, I get that people didn't really like it when it came out, but it's not a cult film.
Yeah,
like
people
have been loving that forever. The people who didn't get it when it first came out were morons. And that's, they were just idiots, because if you didn't get it the first time you watched it, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, but like, it's fine. But like there was a bunch of cult movies, and while they did have a lot of stars from the films in the thing, they also had a preponderance of critics as reviewers on this documentary, like talking heads, but not one of them had any like historical context to any of these cult films or any kind of insight to any of these cult films. They just all spoke about them like they were above them, and you have to understand, like, what makes this a cult film is, and you just say, oh my god, I just want to fucking toe punt you in the genitals. Like, they're just the worst people. And anyone who's like above a film, even if it's a piece of shit film, like, I have no time for it whatsoever. The only time that you should be able to flat out criticize or be above a movie is when millions and millions and millions of dollars were thrown at it by super professional people who ended up making a squid. You know what I mean? Like, ended up making a piece of crap, like a Michael Bay movie or fucking Cats or whatever. Right. Like, look, you had the entire Hollywood system at your disposal. If you laid an egg, that's your fucking fault. That's nobody's fault. But you know what I mean? Like, you could have covered that up by getting a decent DP and a decent AD and whatever, and you didn't do that. That's your fault. But I'm not going to get angry at Godfrey Ho for making the films he made. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Now, I have a confession to make as we're talking about this, and of course, I call myself the direct-to-video connoisseur, totally tongue-in-cheek. It's supposed to be like this image of me, it's like Alistair Cook with my like smoking jacket and ascot, like watching Dolph Lundgren movies instead of like a 10-part BBC miniseries on Nicholas Nickleby or whatever.
No, I love that. I love that image. Yeah.
But I have to make a confession about this. When I first kind of was getting into these movies about 10 years ago, when people were suggesting I start reviewing them for the blog, I confused Richard Harrison with Richard Harris when I saw the name.
Right.
And I remember the first one I watched, I was like, boy, this guy looks young and buff for being Richard Harris. And doesn't really sound all that Irish.
Who's
either.
like an old Irish drunk.
Right.
Yes.
And so when we were picking, and I was, we're talking about a movie for this one, and I had suggested doing this one. For some reason, I went back to that place of thinking Richard Harrison was Richard Harrison. I was like, oh yeah, we got to do this because it's got Richard Harrison in. And you were like, well, he doesn't have his mustache in this one, so it's not as good. And I was like, when did he ever have a mustache? I don't remember that. And I got like a few minutes in, and of course, like early on in the movie, Richard Harrison is there like working out, doing ninja stuff without his shirt on. And I was like, damn it, I did it again. I was expecting, a drunk Irishman to be playing a ninja again.
He does the most amazing bellow of the word ninja in this film. It is absolutely my favorite thing. For no reason at all, it cuts back to him silhouetted by the sun doing his early morning workout. And at the end of it, he just raises his sword above his head and goes, ninja! And then it just cuts. It's like this wonderful cut. It doesn't even let him finish the word ninja. It just, ninja! Then it just cuts like a dead. Oh, it's absolutely glorious. Yeah, Richard Harrison, who got his career after basically being a Hollywood contract player, got his career by going over to Italy and starring in a bunch of sword and sandal epics back in the 60s and 70s before basically making it his home and then occasionally taking jaunts to Asia to star in stuff.
Yeah. He is. I mean, it is. Somebody had joked in IMDb when I was looking at the user rating. Somebody joked that like he really showed up for this one because he shaved his mustache. That's how important this role was, that he needed to shave his mustache for it. That he wanted to be a classier role in this Godfrey Ho film. But yeah, it's with a lot of these actors, I think that's another part of it too, is that there's this mindset of like, again, talking about wanting to be above it, right? Trying to talk down.
And this, by the way, this may be one of the ones that, because Richard Harrison famously said about Godfrey Ho that he made 2 movies with him, and Godfrey Ho ended up putting him in about 10 different movies. This may actually, because of how late it comes in the list, this may actually be one where he's edited in from earlier films. In fact, I'm almost certain that it is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think he does Ninja Master Harry in Ninja Terminator, and I think he does Ninja Master Gordon in the Ninja Squad, and I've got a feeling that all the other ninja films he's in, like Ninja the Protector, Ninja Hunt, Ninja Dragon, Ninja Champion, all those other ones, I think they're literally edited in, because he plays like Ninja Master Gordon in like 12 different films, and I think he only made 1, and I'm not joking.
That is amazing. I mean, see, like that. I think that's yes, obviously here in the United States, he
didn't get paid for it, so I think that's why he was paid.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you tried to pull that as a director here in the United States, SAG would be on you in a heartbeat, and probably the Screen Directors Guild would be on you if you were using other people's movies. I mean, I guess these weren't Godfrey Ho's movies that he was. These were like these half Korean movies that he was putting together.
But they did legitimately buy them, though. They bought unfinished Korean movies for distribution, so that was at least that was at least partly theirs to do what they wanted with it.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, yeah, he would have been in bad shape if he tried. I mean, well, that's the one thing I know. John Saxon talked about doing non-SAG films, and he almost died in that. I think it was Hands of Steel in that movie.
Yes.
There was a helicopter crash, and he was supposed to be on that helicopter, and he wasn't, and it crashed, and the 2 people on board died. And he said, "I will never do a non-SAG movie again."
No, I don't blame him. Yeah, no, that's an insane film as well. That Hands of Steel. We covered that a long time ago on a B-movie podcast that I used to do back in the day, that I haven't done in a long time. But it's crazy, these stories, and I that's the other part of it. It's like when you watch Machete Maidens Unleashed and you see those guys out in the Philippines doing films and living close to the edge and stuff. You just think to yourself, the kind of the anarchists, these sort of mad, like, we've got to get this shot by hook or by crook. And the fact that I always love the fact that you have like someone like Ciro Santiago, is that his name?
Yeah.
And Werner Herzog are sort of the same. Now, Werner Herzog makes very classy films that people like talk about in lofty terms and but they're equally kind of like anarchists in the way that they go about making their films, or Herzog certainly used to be, in the way. Now, Herzog would make these like grand dramas about art and nature, whereas Santiago would make like little Philippine monster movies or martial arts movies or whatever. But still, they have the same kind of cinematic ethos, which is kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I always loved about Herzog was the fact that he loved like working with Klaus Kinski so much, even though Klaus Kinski was such a pain in the ass, and he was like, I need to make my movie with him. He's the only person that can make the movie the way I want it, and he just like put up with whatever Kinski would do, because he needed the movie made that so, and it's like it just seemed like every movie he made with him was like this torturous process that was like almost killing him. But he was like, no, I got to make it with him, which I think that's probably the difference between like I don't think Santiago or somebody like that, they'd be like, if the person gave me a pain in the ass, like I'll just ship them out and bring in somebody else. If Mike Monty doesn't want to do it, then we'll get Jim Gaines or whoever else in the Philippines to make it. So you probably didn't have to deal with quite that, but you're like the idea that just like, this sort of this kamikaze approach to filmmaking. I think that's why a lot of us really like these action movies, and why the movies today, I think sometimes you'll get one. You'll get a big screen.
Eddie Romero was the other Philippine director that I was thinking of as well.
Yes.
I'm a big Eddie Romero fan.
Yeah, I think there's something about these movies. PM Entertainment's another one, but I think there's something about these movies that people gravitate to because it isn't sort of the stuffed collar kind of, film idea that it's got to, I think, and one of the things I think when people were talking about what Scorsese said about, that's not cinema or something like that, I think people automatically thought he was talking about these kinds of movies. And I honestly don't think he was. I think he can appreciate a Godfrey Ho thing probably more than I think the Marvel movies he doesn't like because they're sort of like factory produced. I think that was his mindset about it, and that they're kind of freezing out everything else in the market. Whereas Godfrey Ho, I mean, maybe you could say he was doing it in a factory sense too, but Godfrey Ho wasn't trying to freeze anything out of the market. Godfrey Ho was trying to get into the market any way he could find, and this was the way he found where he was going to take these old movies and make, do something with them somehow, and Ninja was the thing to put them with. And I think you have to appreciate that this is the, whether it's him or whether it's, AIP Productions with David Pryor or Santiago with Corman working together, and just their attempt to get into movies and get into the market and somehow make a living with this stuff as filmmakers. It's just something that I always appreciate.
Oh yeah, no, completely. Give me the cinematic cowboys any day of the week. The stuff that they come up with is just so much more inventive. And I also think that there's something to do with it's why I like that quote so much. Like, as movies get safer, it's not always the content either. It's sometimes just the way the film stock looks.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, like I was saying earlier about Tarantino stuff. After Grindhouse came out, a bunch of independent filmmakers thought it was hilarious to put like fake scratches on all their digitally shot films. And I'm like, I get what they're trying to do, but there's nothing like watching the reason why these films I will always give the time of day, or the Philippine movies or whatever it is that sometimes it's like a horror movie. People watch horror movies so that from the safety of their living room, they can go to a dark place or go to a scary place or go to whatever and know that they'll be safe, right? It's walking on the wild side a little bit while knowing full well that you can like turn the lights on and feel okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes, filmically speaking and cinematically speaking, and I hope this doesn't sound too pretentious, but like sometimes you need to remind yourself that not all movies are shot on like, UX high def, incredibly expensive digital stuff and made in 4DK or whatever the fucking terminology is. I don't know. But like some movies are made scrappy. They're made scrappy and they're made in weird countries you probably haven't visited. And I don't mean weird and anti their culture. I mean just weird and strange and alien to you if you haven't visited those countries or you don't know those cultures or things. And there's something about like seeing this thing that was, cobbled together from another movie, but also filmed like in a part of the world that I haven't visited or whatever, with a bunch of people who, like I say, were either expats or film actors on their way down from their career or whatever it is, that you're just like, at some point, someone set up a camera in this weird place and made this weird thing and cobbled it together and got it out, and it flew across the world to like America, where it gained this kind of like weird little following and stuff. And sometimes it's just good to remind yourself that, before the internet and before big shiny Disney movies and before all this, like there was just these scrappy corners of the world that shouted loud enough to get our attention sometimes. And I mean, I don't know what that means, but it's like the if you just like one type of music, then you can't say you like music. You need to kind of expose yourself even to stuff you might not like, right? I'm not a big dance music guy or a big pop music guy, but every so often there's a pop song you like or a dance beat that you like or whatever. You can't dismiss everything. You have to kind of expose yourself to stuff that is, you have to expose yourself to like esoteric, weird, atonal stuff or whatever it is, just to kind of go, I know I don't like it, but at least I exposed myself to it. And movies have to be like that. I don't think you can call yourself a movie fan if all you've seen is Spielberg and Marvel movies. Like, I'm sorry, you can't, or like J.J. Abrams and Michael Bay movies. Like, you can't. Like, that's one type of movie, and yes, it has its place, and I'm not shitting on those movies necessarily, but like, you can't call yourself a movie fan. You know what I mean? You like a few like hugely popular films that everyone else likes. Congratulations. But you have to dip your toe in a few like puddles of murky brown fluid.
Yes. And I mean, I think too, on top of that too, is that, these movies, they don't require the investment as well that like, Marvel movies coming in at like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and that, to me, that's a huge investment of my, yes, I'm under quarantine right now. I'm not out doing a lot of stuff, but I still value my time enough to be thinking that, that's a huge investment. Whereas these Godfrey Ho movies, or, a lot of these B movies from the 80s and 90s, and if you go back into the 70s as well, a lot of these movies were inside of an 88-minute range because they didn't want to have to, because, it mattered. Reels mattered at that time. Film costs money, and so you didn't want to go 90 minutes because that's 2 minutes of footage that you have to have on another reel. It was like, those kinds of things mattered. Whereas, like, yes, when you've got a $500 million to spend to make a movie, you can make it as long as you want and not worry about it. And your only concern is making sure people stay in the theater long enough to consume enough concessions and make the movie theater happy for you going there. But these movies, they Godfrey Ho didn't want to go too long because he couldn't make it. He couldn't sell all those reels. And I think little elements like that, to me, it's. Yeah, I can appreciate a movie like that more because, one, I'm in and out quicker, but also, two, I can appreciate what, like you were talking about with movies putting, scratches in to make the movie. Godfrey Ho didn't want scratches in his film stock. He didn't want them. He had to deal with them because he had no choice.
Right.
He couldn't afford to just go out and buy new reels whenever he wanted to. He was taking movies that they had bought that were already shot and trying to put them into movies with ninjas. He had to take what he could get. He couldn't just, say, oh, there's scratches in the, so it wasn't a cutesy thing that he was doing just for the hell of it to make it sound nice that he's gonna, and I appreciate that a little bit more, like you said, kind of, what it took to make these movies, how they were dangerous. There was a sense of danger, like literal danger in making them. Yes, I wouldn't want anybody to be dying on the set of making a movie or anybody to get blown up or anything, but there's something about it that, for me, it resonates in the fact that, one, I don't have to make a huge investment. I don't have to follow, like you said, you weren't really following that plot with the two guys and the kid, and it didn't really matter whether you followed it or not. You could still enjoy the movie to a sense. And I think there's something to be said for a movie like that where it, I don't know. I think for me, it's like you're right that for people that just sort of say that just kind of, stay in one lane and only watch one kind of movie, you're missing out, because I think there is a value to a movie like this, that it's a lot of fun, but also
it's like last night. I was home. Friend of ours was doing a video and music presentation, and we were streaming that on our TV, and I was just flicking around Facebook on my phone, and Facebook suggested to me joining a John Carpenter group on Facebook. So I was like, okay, I just closed out a bunch of groups, but I really like John Carpenter, and I just bought a bunch of his Shout Factory Blu-rays, and I'm like, oh, I'll go in and chat John Carpenter. I wasn't in there for more than 10 minutes. I had to completely bail from it, and I bailed from it because it was a group of people that were like, The Thing and Halloween and Big Trouble in Little China and Escape from New York are fantastic, and everything else he did was shit. And I'm like, all right, I can't, like, they were attacking Escape from LA because of the surfing scene, and I'm like, are you all 15? Come on, let's grow the fuck up. Like, the surfing scene is exciting and different and weird and wonderful, and okay, they didn't pull it off with the special effects, but really, you're gonna like torpedo a whole movie because of that? Like, that's insanity. Someone else was like bemoaning Prince of Darkness. I'm like, Prince of Darkness is one of his greatest films. Like, that's ridiculous that you would shit on that. So like, there's so many people out there who are like, well, I like John Carpenter. Oh, you like John Carpenter? What kind of John Carpenter films do you like? Well, The Thing's amazing. Everyone thinks The Thing is amazing. I know that The Thing is amazing. And I know, I'm not saying The Thing isn't amazing. The Thing is amazing. Like, it's in my top 5 films, but it's not the only thing he did. And then, people are like, well, Halloween, Halloween's great. Michael Myers. I'm like, all right, okay. How many of the sequels have you actually seen? Oh, I saw Halloween 2018. Yeah, well, that makes you an idiot. And then you talk to him about, like, well, okay, but what about, like, Christine or Starman or Escape from LA? Oh, the surfing scene. What about Prince of Darkness? I haven't seen that. What about In the Mouth of Madness? I don't even know what you're talking about now. You're just like, I have no time for people like that. Call me a snob, I guess. But.
Yeah, just speaking about Escape from LA, one of my all-time favorite scenes in a movie, and if you haven't seen Escape from LA, and you want to see it, mute right now and come back in like 30 seconds, because I'm going to give away the ending of the movie. But that scene at the end of the movie where they are like kind of, like thinking they've got the little control over all the grid and everything, and they hit the play button on it, and it's Steve Buscemi as the tour guide, the I Love LA playing in there.
Yeah.
That is one of my all-time favorite scenes in a movie. And then, of course, he shuts off the earth and he lights a match, because earlier Stacy Keach is like, old-fashioned stick matches. You never know when you're going to need them. That, to me, just think of movies, my kind of those iconic scenes. Whenever I hear I Love LA, that song there.
Randy Newman.
I was trying to think of the name. I had an R in my head. Whenever I hear that song, I think of that scene in Steve Buscemi earlier in the film. But then, the thing was too, is I knew he was going to do it. I knew it was coming. Or just had a hunch. I had a hunch that there was some kind of, bait and switch that was happening there, that he'd switched things on them.
Yeah, it's a ballsier ending than Escape from New York.
Right.
Escape from New York, yeah, he fucks over the president, but like, whatever, it's the president, you get a new one, to some extent. And I'm sure people would understand. Like, I'm sure people would figure that out. But at the end of Escape from LA, he turns off the world, or at least North America, and reduces it back to the Stone Age, because he has the cojones to know he'll survive.
Right. Yes.
Everyone else might not survive. He'll survive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the Carpenter magic there with the humor of Steve Buscemi playing I Love LA, that he played in his little thing when he was the tour guide. It was perfect Carpenter, I think, there, that mix of comedy and darkness in there, literal darkness in a sense, but the kind of that dark humor that he had. I think he went a little higher with the humor part of the dark humor in that movie, and I think for a lot of people they had trouble. I think they went into it not expecting that, and they didn't know what to do with it.
I just rewatched Escape from New York, and I Escape from New York's a classic. It's fantastic. It's wonderful, right? It is. It's absolutely phenomenal. But there's maybe not as much, but there is plenty goofy and plenty like shoddy and pulpy about Escape from New York. Whether it's the dude who, whether it's the fact that like in this prison island, there's like the Ravagers who come out at night and all have like mad hair or whatever it is, or whether it's Donald Pleasance fitting into like a large egg and going down like Air Force One's escape pod is this like shonky cardboard red egg, or the fact that the glider is like clearly a badly superimposed like polystyrene glider on the top of like a backdrop of New York or whatever. Like there's plenty of stuff in Escape. All the Duke being played by Isaac Hayes with fucking chandeliers on his car. Like there's plenty of stuff that's like ridiculous in Escape from New York. But because it's, you know, the early 80s, end of the 70s, and it's, you know, it's all fairly authentic, and they're not trying to do anything that they can't achieve. Like everything they go for in Escape from New York, they actually achieve.
Yeah.
People give it a massive break because Escape from LA came out in the 90s, because it comes out after Jurassic Park, because it had the budget that it had, which was like close to 50 mil, which is ridiculous really when you watch it. Because of those things, people think Escape from LA doesn't hold up. If you watch it knowing that Carpenter, outside of maybe The Thing and Prince of Darkness, has always been making like pulpy B movies. Yes, he might have done it with more class and style and talent than 90% of the people out there, but he's always been making like pulpy B movies really at his heart. When you watch Escape from LA or Ghosts of Mars or Vampires or any of those later films through that prism, knowing that this is just Carpenter at a later date making yet another kind of like pulpy fantasy action horror comedy, they all are good movie. They all stack up. Like you can't, people who watch Big Trouble in Little China and be like, that's amazing, but then watch Escape from LA and shit on it. I'm like, I don't, like, what are you talking about? Like at the end of Big Trouble in Little China, for no apparent reason, there's a ball full of eyes flying around, like a monster that's a ball full of eyes. There's no reason for any of that, but like everyone goes with it. You know what I mean? So I kind of, to my way of thinking, is like if you like one and don't like the other, you're just being pretentious.
Yeah, and I think there is a sort of thing too where people appreciate stuff from the 80s, especially I think younger people who either, you know, were really young when it came, like you know, like maybe we were younger when it came out, or you know, people that weren't even alive when it came out and they're going back to it. I think there's almost like a sense of like it's better because it's older, and they don't, you know, they don't give things from the 90s. I mean, I think that maybe there's a sense now that people are starting to come around a little bit more in the 90s, but, you know, I can remember movies like Point Break, you know, which is my favorite action movie ever, with, you know, Catherine Bigelow's version.
Oh, that's another one that they claim in this documentary is a cult film. I'm
right.
like, Point Break was a blockbuster when it came out. It had two of the biggest leading men of the 90s in it. But anyway, yeah.
Right. And it's like people, you know, and of course, like the low hanging fruit is they've got to make this whole thing about it being like homoerotic or something like that. And it's like, you know, yes, Catherine Bigelow, I think, was kind of trying to do something exploitative with the male characters, kind of, you know, just as a send up to it. But she does a lot more with that movie. And I think there's just this sense that, well, it's the 80s and it's the 90s, and Keanu Reeves is goes to law school goes to law school on a football scholarship, which is ridiculous, of course, doesn't, you know, and all kinds of things like that happen in it. You know, people named War Child unironically, but I love that movie, but I think if that movie had been made 10 years earlier, it would be like, you know, Captain Blu-ray, you know, give it the fancy release, and everybody would think it's the greatest thing ever. And I think there's a sense that for some reason that the 90s, maybe it's because of, you know, the bigger blockbusters that came out around those times, like the Lethal Weapons and the Beverly Hills Cops and whatnot, that for whatever reason the 90s don't get the respect yet, maybe. And maybe the other thing too is that the 90s had so many like really great it's almost like the 70s as a decade for movies, where you think of so many really great like premiere films that came out at that time, that a movie like Point Break doesn't get the respect that it's supposed to, because people think it's goofy or whatever. I don't know what it is, but it is kind of a shame that, like, you know, and I think Escape from LA suffers from the same thing, that it came out in the 90s and people don't respect it the way that they do. They would have if it had come out 10 years earlier.
Yeah, I did. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I did a like a write-up on 90s movies because I kind of got the impression that and I actually compiled like my top 20 of the whole decade. But like I kind of got the impression a while ago that while the 80s will constantly be brought back up time and time and time again. And I understand why. I'm an advocate for them as well, and the filmmaking from that era. That the 90s, it is this sort of like mad lost decade to kind of a lot of the people talking about movies these days. And maybe it's because it, the indie directors took over, but they weren't as like cool or as dark as the 70s indie directors, like the film brats that they call them, which is basically, for people who don't know, Francis Ford Coppola, De Palma, Spielberg, Lucas, Scorsese. That wave in the 70s were called the film brats because they were kind of the first group of directors raised on movies. They had all their movies were informed by movies. And then in the 90s, you get this wave of directors, people like obviously Tarantino and Rodriguez, who we were talking about earlier. Like Spike Lee starts firing on all cylinders, like in the 90s. You get like Richard Linklater, Steven Soderbergh, Kevin Smith, Wes Anderson, Coen Brothers, Terry Gilliam's, all of them, Michael Mann, all keep doing great work all through the 90s. And you literally see it's interesting, like because of that big wave of indie filmmakers that start coming out, you also get the wave of actors who now are kind of like the Hollywood. They're like the Hollywood stars and the Hollywood elites of almost to rival that of like the 50s and 60s almost nowadays. Those ones that came out in the 90s, whether it's Reeves or Brad Pitt or Clooney or any of the people who kind of came out of that era and who are still making movies today. It's a really important decade, and it just doesn't get I put together my top 20, but you have Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, Fisher King, JFK, Candyman, Army of Darkness, Tombstone, Pulp Fiction, Leon, The Professional, Clerks, Funny Bones, Seven, Strange Days, Casino, Brain Candy, Copland, Jackie Brown, Big Lebowski, Out of Sight, Rushmore, and Office Space. And that's just 20 movies from the 90s. And I'll throw them up against any movie from any decade, so.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I mean, I think one of the fascinating things for me about the 90s is that when I think of some of my favorites, they were some of that, those brats from the 70s. I think of like Goodfellas is one of my favorites. Schindler's List is one of my favorites. And of course, that's Spielberg and Scorsese right there. But I always feel like the Tarantino, Kevin Smith ones were the ones that killed the decade, because it seemed like for B movies in particular, it felt like every B movie that came out in the late 90s was like trying to do Pulp Fiction again. And
right.
And I think that was one of the problems with the B movie in the 90s was that, but I think to somehow like lump like Carpenter in with that kind of thing is wrong. Like Carpenter is, and I think sometimes that's the problem too, is I think for some people who don't know a lot about movies or watch a lot of movies, their instinct is to just write everything off as somebody trying to be Tarantino. And
right.
Sometimes they're right. Sometimes the person is trying to be Tarantino, but someone like a John Carpenter is not trying to be Tarantino. He was there before Tarantino, and he's doing his own thing. And
Tarantino's trying to be John Carpenter and failing
exactly.
every single time out of the gate.
Right,
I don't care how many 3-hour movies he makes in the snow with all of the most famous people in the planet. It's not going to be as good as The Thing. Stop trying.
Right. Yes, exactly.
The Thing, by the way, which is filled predominantly with people you've never heard of unless you're a film fan. Like The Thing, outside of Kurt Russell, like when The Thing came out, like most of the cast were relatively unknown.
Yeah.
It's, whereas Tarantino, he's like, well, I have to make this on 70 mil. I have to get Ennio Morricone to score it. I have to get literally 10 of the most famous people on the planet into it. And then I may come close to making The Thing, but he doesn't. not even in the slightest. So that's I have such a problem with Tarantino. I feel like I don't feel just like that Tarantino like killed B movies for the 90s. I feel like he killed cinema, period. I'm not even kidding you. I feel like, and it's funny because coming of age in the 90s, and Pulp Fiction was a seminal movie for me. I saw it at a midnight screening with my brother when I was 14. Probably the coolest way to fucking see it ever, on like a midnight movie screening at 14. Like shit like that never happened back then, and it was great to kind of have that experience. While that was like a real formative movie, and while it had its place back then, I don't know what good it did like post that. What's interesting is, for me, Tarantino became, so in the 90s, early 90s, they did the Beatles anthology, which was that 6-part documentary they did about the Beatles at their like 30th anniversary or whatever. And as a Beatles fan, as a kid, one of my first albums was a Beatles thing. I watched that anthology. What I got from the anthology was every time they talked about Fats Domino or Big Bill Broonzy or Elvis or Chuck Berry or whoever it was, I was writing those names down and being like, I need to listen to those guys who influenced the Beatles, because if I like the Beatles, chances are I'm going to like the music, whatever. And actually that just leads you to more music, right? Because all of those guys were inspired by stuff and whatever, and you just get to spread your wings if that's the kind of thing you do. Same with like Pulp Fiction to some extent. The moment you learn how much of Tarantino's stuff has always been either heavily borrowed and or inspired by, you want to go find those movies. So I think if you are fascinated enough and passionate enough, Tarantino's movies are a good gateway drug to kind of go back and find the, Faster Pussycat Kill or whatever, that kind of cult movie from the 70s, that, or a Bruce Lee movie or whatever it is that he's playing off. Or hopefully Pam Grier's films from the 70s. But to what comes after him, what he inspires, I don't have a huge amount of time for. But the people who inspired him and the movies that inspired him, he has given me no end of like jumping off points to go find other stuff and other cinematic corners of the world. Because I will, he is a genuine like video nerd, and he is interesting in that respect. He just needs to get rid of his ego, but unfortunately that is well and truly cemented now, because apparently every time he makes a movie, it's literally the greatest film that's ever been made, even if there's no plot, no beginning, no middle, no end, and no end in sight, seemingly. No.
Well, I guess speaking now, yeah, and I think for me with Tarantino, it's like Pulp Fiction it was such a big film for me. Like I loved it so much that it's almost like I will watch the next Tarantino movie if it's available for free for me to stream. I haven't paid for one of his in a while, but I will watch it just because of the I want to see what the next thing. I mean, there are moments in his movies that like Jackie Brown, for example. The Robert De Niro Samuel L. Jackson part I could wasn't really that great, but the Pam Grier Robert Forster stuff I thought was like some of the best stuff that I saw in the 90s. Just
it's the best stuff he's ever done.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So I always watch wondering, like, even if I don't like the whole thing, but I haven't even seen that in a while. I haven't even seen the Robert Forster Pam Grier, and I kind of put that Jackie Brown down towards the bottom of my Tarantino movies because I don't like the rest. I shouldn't say I don't like it, but the rest of it didn't work as much for me. But the more I think about it, it's like, no, I remember seeing that in the theater. That's like one of the only Tarantino films I saw in the theater was Jackie Brown, and I that was like, Pam Grier I knew. I knew a lot of Pam Grier movies going into that one. But Robert Forster was not somebody I really knew that well. Right. And it's almost like for him, a lot of the other movie stars, there were movie stars, and they're like, okay, I'm doing a Tarantino movie. I'm probably not going to get paid a lot because, I'm taking a break, so I want to work with this Tarantino guy. He was really great in Pulp Fiction. And they're like, I'm a Hollywood star. Like, what do I have to prove in this movie? Whereas Robert Forster's like, I'm in this movie that's going to be in theaters everywhere. And I think Pam Grier thought the same thing. I've got to hit this out of the park. This is a big moment for me. And it just felt like, there was so much earnestness in their performances. It did make me want to go out. And it's like every time I see Forster's name come up on something, I've got to see it because I loved him so much in that movie that I had to see him in everything else after.
Yeah, completely. I mean, the fact that Pam Grier and Robert Forster didn't win all of the Oscars that year is ridiculous. Because the performance of the two of them in that, and I would edit out all of the De Niro, Sam Jackson stuff. I really would. It was Michael Keaton is amazing in that movie. Pam Grier is amazing in that movie, and Robert Forster is amazing in that movie. It really is. All the other stuff kind of grates on my nerves. It really does. All the other stuff where Tarantino just thinks he's writing the coolest fucking dialogue that's ever been said by anyone, and I'm,
right,
it's
exactly.
Just like with hindsight, it's just so tiring. Like the way people talk in Tarantino films, it's just so tiring and obvious. It's kind of irritating. But yeah. Well, sir, we have gone all over the shop.
I was going to say, I know, we'll probably
started with sports,
right.
Reviewed the movie in the middle somewhat, and then ended up in the 90s. But I think the 90s are a good place to end because I think what we're basically saying, Matt, is that we need to be the two guys who put the 90s on the map. We need to be the guys who get the hipsters interested in the 90s. That's what we need to do. We need to get the hipsters away from the 80s because they like all the wrong things about the 80s. They don't like the good stuff from the 80s. They shit on the good stuff from the 80s. They like all the wrong stuff from the 80s. Let's get them away from the 80s. Let's start getting them talking about the 90s. I want to blow their minds with a few 90s things. And I think that's what we do. When this all blows over, we do a new series of podcasts just called The 90s. And each episode is a week from the 90s, and we just start doing that. I think I don't know whether
that's fantastic. I think and I think maybe no Tarantino, it could be the rule, or I guess no. I mean I think the Jackie Brown conversation would be great for that, but I think just being like okay we're gonna just talk about some of the stuff that people either pan a lot or just don't even know about. There's so many movies from the 90s that are just so amazing. I was talking with somebody about a movie called The New Age with Peter Weller that came out in 96.
Yes.
I think that. I love that movie. It's just one of my favorites. And and he's just so fantastic. I mean, it's Peter Weller, just and it's like a movie that was kind of an indie flick that just didn't really make it that far. But yeah,
not to mention Screamers, wasn't that in the 90s?
That was another. Yeah, he did some really great stuff. I think people think that it's like RoboCop and Buckaroo Banzai, but he kept working.
95
after that.
Screamers, it's so good. And I just looked on my 95 list, and I don't have it on my 95 list. Oh my God, what an oversight that was.
Well,
but yeah, check out
a big year too, But I think Screamers is definitely. I mean, even if it's not on a top list for your 95, I think if you're a Weller person, if you've seen RoboCop,
no, it should be on there. It should be on there. I have in 90, and you're right, 95. What a year, man! Yes. I had like 10 honorable mentions because I was trying to do top 10 of every year, and then I have honorable mentions. Yeah. But 95 saw In the Mouth of Madness, The Quick and the Dead, Funny Bones, Die Hard with a Vengeance, The Usual Suspects, Seven, Strange Days, Leaving Las Vegas, Casino, 12 Monkeys. That's my top 10. And then honorable mentions were Heavyweight, City of Lost Children, Demon Knight, Desperado, Richard III, Mallrats, and Living in Oblivion. Yeah. It's a pretty great year.
What an amazing! I mean, the 90s
and Screamers. I should add Screamers now.
Yeah, I mean, if you go through just about every year in the 90s, it is amazing. I think when you get past the mid 90s, when sort of the Tarantino echo starts to take effect, I think it's like a Tarantino Clerks echo almost. Like those two really seem to do it. And Desperado to some extent also influenced the B movie of the 90s, but it feels like once that echo starts to take effect, I mean, there was a little bit of another wave in the late 90s into the early 2000s that saw some really interesting movies, but it feels like, at that there's a certain point where I think Tarantino starts to, his effect takes over, but then also the blockbuster studio thing starts to take over, where it's just like, if this movie's not going to make $4 billion, just, open it in a few screeners and then put it straight to video.
Yeah, exactly. But no, check out, I wrote an article, The Filmmaking of the 1990s and My Top 20 of the Whole Decade, on aftermoviediner.com. So check that out, because there's some great movies that are worth discussing in that. But Matt, this has been a fantastic conversation, sir.
Yes, I've had a great time with you. Now before we wrap up, because you mentioned the After Movie Diner site, where can people find you?
People can find me at aftermoviediner.com and all its subsidiary social media sites, which are all anywhere where the words After Movie and Diner come together. That is me. And you can also find me at Misc Plum Fix, which I'm going to spell for you. It's MISC, like Misc for miscellaneous, Plum, PLUMB, like short for plumber, and Fix, FIX, short for fixtures. MiscPlumFix.com for all of my music links. Right now, we're still promoting Where Our Hearts Can Be a Shambles, the latest album that came out in February. I also uploaded an album that is all old songs from about 12 or 13 years ago. That's a compilation of stuff I found on an old hard drive that I've uploaded. And I've uploaded up to 7 tracks so far, but all the tracks that I'm recording in quarantine are going on an album called We're Working on It, which I have currently on SoundCloud for free. All the links are available at miscplumfix.com. Check it out if you like weird indie rock folk stuff.
Yeah, I can attest to the album being great, because I have been streaming it on Spotify. I think it's really great. So yeah, people should definitely check it out. It's so and you can always I think I mean, every once in a while, if I see something, I'll definitely retweet it from Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. But I think on the Facebook page that I have shared some of the links on there, so sometimes people can see it on there too. That if they forget the link or something like that.
And Matt, I was playing around today. I don't know if you saw the post go up in the After Movie Diner Dr. Action Facebook group, but I was playing around today with a live streaming platform called StreamYard, where I'm planning on doing some live shows, sort of in the vein of Crosstalk, but hopefully with guests and some interviews, but all on sort of Facebook Live or Periscope or some kind of platform like that, but using this thing called StreamYard, where you can share your screen and show videos and talk over trailers and show clips of stuff and have music and all the stuff we were kind of doing audibly through Mixler. You can now do through StreamYard using video. So I will hopefully try and get you on one of those if you're willing to be on camera.
Yes.
I will have you on one of my live stream interview shows once I've decided what that is and how that looks and how that works.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I mean, I work from home and sort of have my office set up, so I've got a good background and everything, and I can always, if I have a bad hair day, I can always throw on my Moxie baseball cap or something like that. And so, yeah, I would absolutely love it. And even if it's an episode I'm not on, definitely, I'm happy to kind of get the word out, and we can kind of put stuff on the direct to video site as well, because that sounds really exciting for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You don't have to keep that. Let's wrap it up, and then I'll just quickly tell you some stuff after the episode's done. But.
All right, that sounds good. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Where to find DTV Connoisseur. I think probably the dtvconnoisseur.blogspot.com is probably the place to go because all the links are there. One thing to keep in mind, I do keep forgetting to mention, people, if you're going through it on the mobile site, you're not going to see all the links if you're just doing it on the mobile site. So you can always go down to the bottom of the page, click View Web Version, and you'll get all the links to everything if you need to check us out on social and all that kind of stuff. But thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Jon, again, for coming on. It was another great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome, Matt. Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Till next time. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, so I was going to...
Mary redeemed a $50,000 cash prize playing Chumba Casino this year.
I was only playing for fun, so winning this was a dream come true.
Chumba Casino is America's #1 social casino experience. It's serious fun. With over 80 casino-style games to choose from, you too could win life-changing amounts of cash. Be like Mary. Log on to ChumbaCasino.com and give them a whirl. That's ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void or prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. The voice in the preceding commercial was not the actual voice of a winner.